Well, let's roll forward, Lauren. How about it?
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so for those who have just joined, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself in the chat box, we'd love to know what you're interested in or who you're affiliated with. We are going to get started now. Today we're going to hear from Eric Peterson, our Willamette Valley Project Operations Project Manager. He is going to go over current water conditions, forecasts, and how we plan to manage water throughout the upcoming month. We encourage questions, and we plan on having time after Eric gives his presentation. So feel free to chat in your questions in the chat box or comments. We'd love to hear from you and get any input we can. So please submit your questions, comments, and we'll get to them either throughout the presentation or afterwards. And I've muted all lines. So Eric, I think you're good to go.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to say good afternoon, folks. Lauren, thanks for the introduction. This is the fourth virtual public meeting we've conducted since the start of the stay-at-home orders in the pandemic, and the others have been pretty successful. The first was really sponsored by the North Sandy Am, it was the North Sandy Am Summit hosted by the City of Salem and the North Sandy Am Watershed Council. The other three were our own meetings related to dam safety, risk communications, and water management on the 6th, 7th, and 8th of May. We shared models and projections and forecasts for the reservoirs for this conservation season at that time. Those have changed a little bit since then. We'll be going through those changes and what near term, what it looks like for the conservation season. I want to mention just briefly, I saw that Ross Heiner is on the line. Ross is our Dam Safety Program Manager for the Portland District. And interesting, there were a couple dam failures in the state of Michigan yesterday due to a number of problems related to dam safety and earthen embankment and hydrologic vulnerabilities. And I want to say from where I sit, I'm not comfortable because there's always risk associated with dams, but I'm very confident that we manage that risk really well, and we're fortunate to have experts like Ross Heiner as part of our cohort managing this entire system. And today Ross is up at Green Peter Dam conducting a periodic inspection, something that happens every 5 years, and tells us really whether the dam is performing in the ways that we expect it to do. We bring in a cohort of experts, and they're looking at all kinds of data and really touching every part and piece of the facility. So we do that on all our facilities, and we do that so that we can be aware of their condition, their performance, and be able to manage them to an acceptable level of risk. I want to thank all of you for making time to be here today. I wish that we could meet in person, but we can't. And so I think you'll find this format worthwhile. I hope that both you and your families and the people you care about are all doing well. There's an old adage that almost without exception, the moment I begin to talk publicly about drought, it begins to rain. So I have been talking about drought. It has been raining a little bit more, but I think today I'll be able to explain a little bit about where we are and how we got to where we are, and I hope that this will be a productive and insightful session. So today's discussion, current priorities in a constrained environment, just share with you kind of what our operating picture looks like right now. The system overview, we'll talk a little bit about SNOWPACK and snow water equivalent. We'll talk about the 2020 water level forecast, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. And also, anytime you have a question, put it into the chat box there, and we'll be sure that we'll either answer it today or answer it shortly thereafter and post it on our website. So when we went into sort of abnormal conditions with the state of emergency due to the pandemic, the priorities that I laid out for my team here on site in the Willamette Valley were these right here: supporting the emergency, operating facilities, moving water, and making power while taking care of people. Obviously monitoring the facilities for dam safety, sustaining security, maintaining public safety and reliability of the facilities while ensuring environmental compliance. Certainly accomplishing the high priority work that's necessary to be able to sustain our mission, both in the short run and over the longer haul, and focusing on critical maintenance, critical stewardship and repairs, and then tying up capital work that we had ongoing, complying with the BIOP, managing listed species or managing for listed species, something else that we're doing, and protecting resources, both natural and cultural resources, all part of what we're doing right now. On any given day, we have better than 2/3 of our staff reporting on site for work, and we're managing things really well, I think, from the standpoint of protecting people. We've split schedules, we've split crews, we've isolated control rooms. We have established administrative controls and protocols that have kept people safe and really diminished the risk to our folks, so that regardless of circumstance and sickness, we're going to figure a way to maintain these facilities, keep moving water, and sustain our highest priorities. It is also noteworthy that most of our recreation areas have opened up, and we're wrestling with how to open up campgrounds right now. But we're confident that we're going to be able to do that in some form beginning in June. And that's good. Nationally, we're in support of some FEMA missions related to COVID-19, and that's facility assessments and then building out facilities for alternative care. And we did some assessments in Silverton, North Bend, and also in Eugene. And then last week we completed construction on a facility in Eugene for Lane County. And it will be used for treating and quarantining people who are unhoused, and later will be repurposed as a kind of a navigation site for people looking for services, trying to get off the street. As you know, the Willamette Project is represented by 13 reservoirs, 11 multi-purpose reservoirs with storage, and 2 reservoirs that are really just re-regulation reservoirs. We've got 5 fish hatcheries, 5 adult fish collection facilities, several associated with hatcheries, several not. There is a navigation channel, Portland Harbor to Corvallis. Willamette Falls Lock is obviously part of the system of development on the Willamette. And then the bank protection program is 100 miles of revetments on both the main stem Willamette and on tributaries, mostly to protect agricultural lands. Here's a snapshot of our facilities, all 13 of the dams, different sizes and shapes. What's notable is that most of our facilities are high head facilities, high hazard facilities because of the population at risk downstream. COUGAR is 452 feet tall, Detroit 463 feet tall. These are not small facilities. And they were built for these authorized purposes. Flood risk management is our obvious principal purpose. Last April, we had a storm event that was unusual, and our facilities prevented, and the way that we manage water, prevented $2 billion of damage as a consequence of that storm event. Everything else is managed in balance and in tension and taken into account when we make decisions around water management. Current conditions. Detroit is down about 15%. You can see that. It is noteworthy that the spillway gate construction that we had ongoing did not impact refill. We were back to the rule curve or the water control diagram by February 1st. It's also important to note that we have some interim risk reduction measures for dam safety at both Hills Creek and Lookout Point. And really the refill this year is not really encroaching on those particular elevations. And those elevations are really intended to give us a little bit more freeboard as we do issue evaluation studies related to dam safety, seismic issues at both of those facilities. But again, that's not impacting us. System storage, as you can see right now, it's changed. This teacup diagram was posted yesterday, and today it's at 84 and 16, so it's 84% full, which puts us 16% below the water control diagram. Much better than I thought we would end up this year, and that's principally due to precipitation we've had in May. All right, this year, February, March, April, and May, when you look at the maps, the red and orange and yellow represent below average precipitation. The red is 50% or below 50% of average precipitation. And you can see that in February, when we begin to refill this system, most of the system was 50% below, some 50 to 70, and some 70 to 90. But it was below. Same with March, well below in March, worse yet in April. In May, we've had above average precipitation. It's really helped to change the models and the forecasts, really helped to top off the system a little bit. But recognize the precipitation we get ordinarily in May is much less than we would get in April or March or certainly February, when the monthly average is much higher. Not to say that this May didn't really kind of save the season for us. It helped us a lot, as well as some of the decisions we made around storage earlier in the year. Earlier in the year, we were drawing some comparisons between the 2020 water year and the 2015 water year. And so to be able to look at these maps, precipitation maps, side by side and compare is kind of helpful. 2020 certainly was a drier year in February, March, and April. And if you remember 2015, most of the reservoirs in the Willamette system didn't fill in 2015. We had pretty much a historic drought that kind of rivaled the drought that we had in 2001. Similar to 2015, we had a little bit better rain across the region. This year, in 2020, obviously the month of May has been abundant in precip, and it's really helped us. A little bit about the snow water equivalent, how we got to where we got to there. We were below the median snow water equivalent for the entire year, with the exception of part of April. And our peak snow water equivalent was a little bit later in the season than it ordinarily is. Usually the peak snow water equivalent is where this green X is, sort of towards the end of March. It was a little bit later in April. You can see that the snow came off, or the water in the snow came off pretty quickly this year. Fairly steep black line that represents this year, and right now we're at about 45% below, or 45% of what we would ordinarily expect to see in terms of snow water equivalent this year. We had some warm rain in April, and that also helped move some snow into water into reservoir storage, which kind of helped the system. What it will do, though, is because this has come off the way that it's come off, we're not going to have quite the inflows later into the season that we would ordinarily see in a more average year. Climate outlook, above average temperatures, and sort of equal chance of precipitation. Could be above average, could be below average, 3 to 4 weeks out. So these maps go out to about the middle of June. fairly recent map here, the U.S. Drought Monitor Oregon map, shows that much of the state is in a state of drought. Most of the valley is in severe drought, given the conditions we've had for the water year over a protracted period of time. Even with the water that we've had in May, we're still in a drought situation. So in terms of flow management this year, what's noteworthy is that we did have kind of a difficult start to the conservation season. We're collaborating with Bonneville Power Administration, National Marine Fisheries Service, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and others in terms of how to manage this system to meet the 2008 biological opinion objectives for conservation season and balance the other competing demands on the system. So a couple of things that we did this year: we did not sustain flows meeting main stem water quality targets in April. We also moderated flows below main stem targets for the first part of May. We stored more water in reservoirs by modifying some of the tributary targets in April and early in May. And because we made adjustments earlier in the year, we've been able to store more water than what we would have expected to store. So we've been able to store 1.26 million acre feet of the total 1.6 million acre feet of storage capacity that we have. And so 1.26 out of 1.6 overall. Had we not made those adjustments, we'd have been below 1 million acre feet by the middle of May. So the trade-offs really involved recognizing we had colder water this spring and needed less flow for water quality benefits on the main stem earlier. And we were also thinking that if we remained dry through May, it would be better to conserve more water that we had in April and be able to try to operate for temperature downstream and not tap all of the storage that we had over the course of the conservation season during the summer months and run out of water towards the end of the summer. So it's been a balancing act and a bit of a delicate dance trying to manage those trade-offs and ensure that we had enough water stored to be able to meet those targets a little bit later in the year and to be able to manage for temperature. So just recapping and providing a little bit more detail, we have managed adaptively. We'll continue to look at main stem targets over the course of the conservation season and adapt with time. But right now, we've increased flows from mid-May on to 1,500 CFS in the South Santiam and 1,500 CFS in the North Santiam, and adjusted main stem Willamette flow targets based on the conditions that we have to 15,000 CFS, minimum 7-day at Salem, and a hard lower limit of 13,000 CFS. And our forecast kind of looks like this. The middle fork was hit kind of the hardest with drought impacts this year, and Hills Creek and Lookout Point have probably peaked in terms of the storage that we have for them there. The blue line there represents the 50% non-exceedance curve, meaning we're about as equally as probable to go above as to go below those elevations listed or identified by the blue line. The plum-colored line is the 5% non-exceedance curve. It's the most pessimistic forecast, meaning there's only a 5% chance we'll realize reservoir elevations below this level. And so 95% chance we'll be above this level. And the red line is the 95% non-exceedance curve, meaning there's only a 5% chance we'll have more storage than what's in this red line here. These models reflect our assumptions about where we'll store water and where we'll take water for main stem targets and tributary targets. So for both Lookout and Hills Creek, we're likely at peak. There's Lookout. It looks pretty similar to Hills Creek in terms of the trajectory of fill and drawdown. Fall Creek looks a little bit better because it's a smaller reservoir and because of the recreation development there. We tend to use its storage a little bit later in the season to meet flow targets downstream, and that appears to be the case this year. We're going to fill a little bit more up until end of June, and then beginning then gradually draw down, and expected to see drawdowns pick up more in mid-August. There'll be a number of facilities available for recreation there and should have a pretty good season. Cottage Grove, same thing. We're not going to, it looks very unlikely that we'll fill, even the 95% probability or 95% non-exceedance curve doesn't look like it's going to fill. So this blue line, number of facilities are still functional and should have a pretty good recreation season at Cottage Grove. Darena is one of the more flashy reservoirs in the system. Conservation for Darena looks pretty good. We'll get close to filling there. Fern Ridge is really interesting this year. It has had a difficult refill season. We've been at the absolute minimum outflows since early February. So after the one storm event we had in early February, we've been discharging 50 cubic feet per second. And we recently, in mid-May, stepped that back to about 35 or 36 CFS. So there's just barely a trickle leaving Fern Ridge going down the lower Long Tom right now. But as you can see, we'll hold fairly steady through the course of the recreation season. And right now, this elevation that we're at makes most, if not all, of the recreation facilities available to the public there. Cougar, we expect to see some fairly rapid increase yet in inflows and refill. And then we've got a special operation scheduled for, or under consideration for later in the season, that in conjunction with meeting main stem Willamette targets, we'll be pulling water from Cougar to evaluate some habitat downstream. Blue River is also a reservoir that generally the storage gets used in low water years for main stem targets fairly early on. You can see that we have already peaked. We're beginning to recede at Blue River already. All right, Detroit. I know we have a lot of North Sandiam interests on the phone, and right now Detroit looks like we're going to continue to refill until towards the end of June. We'll peak at elevation around 1560 if I'm looking at this 50% elevation non-exceedance curve correctly, and then we'll be down around 1540 at the end of August or around Labor Day. So not a great year in that it does not look like we'll be filling there. Not a horrible year in that it looks like there will be recreation facilities available through the season. Green Peter, the South Sandiam has had a better refill season than really anywhere else in the system, and Green Peter is going to continue to fill up until the end of June, and then we'll begin using that water to augment the system main stem. Foster is a sort of a quasi re-regulation facility for Green Peter. It does have some storage. As you can see, we have installed a fish weir, and right now we're refilling back up to a full conservation season, and then because of the limited storage there and the limited utility for it, we hold this reservoir fairly full for recreation and fish interests, and then pull it down in the fall. So a couple of just summary comments here. You know, every water year is unique. Every subbasin is unique, and and forecasting this year has been challenging. We are doing the best that we can to make the best of a marginal, and I have in parentheses there, a severe drought water year with partners. Early on, making some of those adjustments to flows to be able to capture and store water was really beneficial and will pay dividends over the course of the summer, both for fish and for recreation interests. Early adaptive management improved the system storage. Reservoirs are probably at or near peak for the season. Most of the reservoirs, some have already, like Blue River, have already passed peak. We are meeting biop, tributary, and main stem water quality targets right now. And should conditions change dramatically, we'll do this again. We'll do another virtual town hall and be responsive to people's questions. We will be meeting week to week with all of our partners, where we look at conditions, where we look at needs of the system and understand the tension and pressure and balancing competing demands, and work collaboratively to try to manage adaptively. So that is a kind of a week-to-week change. Should anything in that collaborative effort have big bearing on what we see forecast, we'll be reaching out. We'll do this again. I want to say thank you for joining us. Appreciate you taking time to gain understanding. This has been recorded, will be posted. I know that Lauren is going to manage the chat here if there are questions that come in. Also, there's some links to more information here. If you're not aware, the Portland District website will have some good data with it. The teacup diagram is there. The Northwest River Forecast Center provides great information and data on what's happening across the region. And our public affairs email and phone number are right there on the slide as well. Lauren, how about I turn it over to you?
Sounds good. I'm not seeing any questions so far, so if anyone has questions or comments, please send those in. And thank you, Eric, for presenting.
Welcome.
And just a reminder, if you do have questions or comments, we're taking those in the chat box. If you hover over your screen, 3 circles to the right, there's a little thought bubble. Click on that and it opens up the chat box. So feel free to chat in your questions or comments.
All right. Well, we've got that awkward silence at the end of one of these things where I think everybody seems to be pretty well satisfied. Really appreciate everyone's attendance. Brian Carroll out there, hey, thanks for joining us. Ross, hope the periodic inspection at Green Peter goes well. We'll talk later this week. Lauren, thanks for your facilitation of this. And let's hope we continue to get more rain up until the 4th of July, and perhaps by that time, everybody will feel better about getting outside and using the resources. All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to keep monitoring the chat. Audrey asked if the slideshow is going to be posted to the website. I'm going to post this recording to our YouTube, and I'm putting the link to our YouTube in the chat. Thanks, everyone, for joining.